Welcome to the Phillip Wylie Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wylie.
Hello, welcome to another episode. I'm very excited about our guest joining today. I had the opportunity to meet her a while back at a trip to our corporate headquarters, and it's always really cool for me. I'm really impressed to see people that are young that are already doing such amazing things in the industry. I've had some students like that in the past and it's really impressive to me because for me it was hard to learn pen testing. Wasn't something to come really easy for me, especially the hacking part. And anytime I see someone that is that young and they're already doing the things they're doing, it's pretty amazing. And I think it's going to be a great interview. So welcome to the show, Shani.
Thank you, Phil. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I was very impressed when I got to meet you a few weeks back on your background, and just the things that you're doing is pretty impressive, and sometimes you see some of the types of pen testing that's done these days and some of the consulting companies. There's some great consulting companies out there, but just kind of the regular commoditized pen test where someone runs a vulnerability scan, they validate vulnerabilities, they try some exploitation, and there's just not a lot of time and effort. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of boring to see some of the type of pen testing and the type of stuff that you're doing where you're at. It's pretty amazing that you're really performing high quality pen tests. It's not just a bunch of certificate based things around TLS or SSL. You're doing some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think that the main obstacle of companies and of CISOs and security teams is like they get the vulnerabilities, they have tons of automated tools, etc. But the real problem, is to prioritize the things and to assess the real risk. And I think that this is like the special thing that we do here.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, and the stuff that's the type of tests you do are pretty interesting. So why don't you share with our audience, kind of share how you got started, your background, and then what the role you're doing today.
Okay, so actually, my background, I learned I entered to the cybersecurity world in the army. Before I learned in my school, computer science and physics. I was such a nerd, but in the army, I really learned, the real thing, I can say. I served in the Israeli intelligence course. Um, there, I was responsible for a huge SIM system, one of the biggest ones, in the Middle East. So it was like a huge responsibility, and I was very, very young. I was 19, and I learned actually OJT, I mean, on-job training. I started to learn things. I got a huge responsibility, and then I started to learn. It's quite funny, but I think that you learn the best and the fastest when you have to do something. So I had to do it. I mean, this was my role, and it was very, very important, for my country. So yeah, at the beginning, I really had to be there, days and nights, and I started to learn from zero. I can say that I barely knew. I remember that I didn't know what CMD is. So it's very, very. I started from bottom. I mean, very basic, and then after a year and a half, I became the commander of my team. And so I think that the army is very good at finding unique and good people, because I think that in our, in the cybersecurity industry, and especially in the red team industry, I believe that you will agree with me. You need to be special. I mean, your personality has to be special. You have to always think outside of the box and be creative. And I think that this what helped me, to get into it. Of course, after my military service, I started to look for a job, and I signed a contract with SAI when I was still a soldier. And we get a lot of offers during our military service, because I really believe that the experience from the army is very, very unique and good. And I signed a contract with SAI. And actually, I had no experience with the red team. I came from the sim world, the sock world, and then I just dived in to the red team world. I don't know why. I mean, I also got several, contracts to work with, in the more of the security theme, but I chose the red team because I don't know, something in my guts told me to do this. I really have no explanation, but now I can say that this was the best decision, and because the work here at SAI is very, very interesting, and of course I can see the benefit and the how I work, how I help organizations, and to improve themselves. um, so this is like the main, this is why I satisfy the work here. I mean, it's cool like to attack websites and to be a hacker and to do crazy things, but at the end of the day, the goal here is not like to be cool. It's like to help organizations and to sometimes even save them. And I think that this is the main thing here.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's it's good that you kind of followed your intuition. So you're passionate for red team, and it seems like when people follow their passion, you're going to work harder because if it's something you enjoy doing, it's like you go to work, you're having fun. It's a lot more. You're going to learn more and work harder, and if you have to work extra hours, it's not as big of a deal because you're having fun while you're doing it. It's almost kind of like a hobby for some people.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that after a time you develop a sense, a sixth sense. I would say, like when I map a huge organization, sometimes Sai gives me a name of an organization, and I'm trying to map the external attack surface, and then I see, I don't know, 2,000 domains. I'm trying to to see what will be interesting for me, because I'm trying to build an attack route at the end of the day. So I think that, like, when you're practicing and you're starting to do assessments on a daily basis, you're starting to feel where you can find the interesting things, and usually you will find the interesting things and the entry points in the most, not in the main website. Usually, we'll find it in the weak VPN interface or in the development interface that is accidentally exposed. I mean, you develop you feel it. You're starting to feel it, and I think that it's very cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of times, you mentioned some of the websites or domains that may not be the main domains that you find things is because it seems like security knows about these certain areas and they work really hard to defend them, but sometimes they don't think about some of these other areas just because maybe it's not used as much doesn't mean that an attacker is not going to use that to get into an organization.
Exactly. Attacker is trying, to find the most um unique entry points in order to stay, stealth. Um, so I would recommend to organizations to defend not only on their main website, but also to make sure that the staging and development interfaces are. Are not exposed to the world, and to defend the VPN interfaces, and also I would say to check the GitHub repositories Sometimes I see that employees accidentally expose secrets in their also in the private GitHub repositories. It's very important to always check the external attack surface of your organization. It's very very important, and I think that here at SAI we help organizations to see and to understand how the world see them, and it's really really important.
Yeah, one of the things I'd say is interesting too, because a lot of times or reasons people have red teaming done or pen testing done is to take that threat actor or malicious actor perspective of assessing their security. And it really seems like what you're doing there, you're really doing more of that, because we kind of mentioned earlier how some of these commoditized or some of these fully automated pen tests or mostly automated pen tests where they don't put a lot of effort in, you miss a lot of things. So the way you do things there is pretty interesting and more thorough compared to your normal penetration test.
Yeah, I would recommend to red teamers to try and really get into the heads of real attackers. I mean, if I'm attacking an organization, first of all, I will ask them about their crown jewels, because when I'm attacking an organization, like you said, I can say, hey, you have a weak SSL cipher, but I will try to help them with the advanced attack routes. I mean, if let's take an example, Coca-Cola, right? If they have a very secret recipes to their drinks, this is like their intellectual property or something. Then, as an attacker, I will try to get into there. Like I can say to Coca-Cola's CEO, yeah, I have a domain admin in your domain. But if I will tell him, yeah, I can leak all your recipes, it will be more. This is like the main thing, to get into the head of a real attacker and to understand the crown jewels of the organization that you helped them.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because a lot of times pen testers, red teamers will be too focused on domain admin or root, enterprise domain admin and all this stuff, and that's all good. And you want to make sure you're protecting against that, but don't you find there's a lot of cases that the intellectual property of the crown jewels is somewhere that may not require that much access? You may not have to be domain admin or administrator, or maybe sometimes those areas aren't really protected well.
Yeah, I would say that getting a domain admin or taking over an organization is only the first step, because a real attacker will not stop there. So we will also not stop there. I think that the impact phase is really important in order, to map the and prioritize the mitigation plan of the vulnerabilities.
So you're doing a lot around cloud now. So how's that? Has that been a pretty interesting type of assessment to add to your experience?
Yeah, actually, here I'm responsible for developing the cloud security methodology, and it's quite a new topic, in the world. Um, I think that the main obstacle is that, organizations are migrating to the cloud, and the main obstacle is, to migrate in a right way. I mean, first of all, we will try not to migrate, not to take the misconfigurations from the on-prem environment and to move them to the cloud environment. We try to do it in the best way. And secondly, I see that sometimes organizations become quite I would say, naive, because you feel that the cloud environment is very very secure by default, and it's right, but organizations do have a responsibility also when they migrate to the cloud. It's very important to understand the responsibility of the organization. Although the cloud environment is, yeah, it's more secure, but you always have to understand your environment and to understand your responsibility. And I think that this is the main obstacles. And as more as the company is more big, it's more hard. So The goal here is to help organizations to migrate in a right way.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because a lot of people go to cloud thinking it's going to be more secure, and like you said, it can be, but sometimes the way they configure things to get their on-prem and their cloud environments to communicate, sometimes they open up vulnerabilities. What are some of the most common vulnerabilities you see on a cloud assessment?
Actually, in 97% of the assessments, I see misconfigurations in how you store technical secrets. Usually, I find technical secrets in environment variables of lambdas or in user data in EC2s, or in TXT files in buckets, And this is like, I think this is the most common finding in cloud environment. And also, it's like a misconfiguration from the on-prem, because I I think that almost in every organization I see clear text credentials in network shells and in SharePoint, etc. So it's very important, like to that the developers and the IT team will be conscious of this thing. And another common mistake is, of course, the exposed resources. Yeah, this is a huge risk. When accidentally employee exposes I don't know, EC2 with the RDP connection to the whole world, or exposes buckets with anonymous read and write access. This is harder to do because you get alerts from the cloud environment as well, but this is also a very common one. Um, so it's very important to do a continuous assessment, because these environments are very dynamic. So it's very important to perform continuous assessments in order to be in control about your environment all the time.
Very interesting. You kind of mentioned some of the vulnerabilities through cloud. What are some, you were mentioning, you know, defining the attack surface when you're doing your test, mapping the attack surface. What are some other uh, risks that people have for their external attack surface outside of just
And
cloud?
um, usually when I'm trying to attack an organization, first I will find all the VPN interfaces, because this is like the bridge from the external world to your internal network. And I can tell you that, like for big organizations, let's take an example of an organization uh, which has which is on in 10 countries, and each country has their own VPN, and all the VPNs are protected with a 2FA, and only one is not. Then I will check the one which is not protected with 2FA, and I will perform password spray. And it happened to me like a month ago. I found one VPN interface which wasn't protected with the 2FA, and it was enough. And let's take example, if this VPN is for users in Spain, then I will try to spray Barcelona 123 or Spain 2023, or password one, etc., like guessable passwords. And actually it worked. So the VPN interfaces are the main point of failure. um, Also, we will try to find staging and domains, and the domains of the developers which are not protected with a whitelist approach. I mean, usually you need to expose the staging interface, only to the developers. But we see that organizations accidentally expose their staging environments to the whole world. Um, so usually we can get in from there, because the chances of a staging website to be vulnerable are higher than a production website. Um, Also, we conduct recon activities, we can before we even start, with scanning, etc. We conduct passive recon. I mean, I'll try to look and perform Google Dorking with your company name in order to see if people from the IT team or from the developers team asked questions, in forums, etc. And you will be surprised, but we found amazing things from there. Also, as I said before, I found credentials of a critical user in a public GitHub repository. I mean, I think that the passive recon is also very important, and some red teamers are missing this part because you're trying straight to scan everything and to be very violent, but before that you can find amazing things, only with a passive search in Google. So this is
Yeah,
another nice insight.
yeah, it's interesting because it seems a lot of cases in what, in my opinions, kind of caused that is, a lot of red teams or pen testers are really not performing adequate reconnaissance, and part of it's because maybe it's for PCI and they're only going to scan. Maybe there's only 100 IPs that are external, and that's all they're going to scan. They don't go through and look through the domains and subdomains, try to do subdomain enumeration. There's things that they miss out on because they're not doing the reconnaissance.
Yeah, I can say that here at SAI, we spend a lot of time in the reconnaissance phase. It's very, very important. We have several techniques, passive and active, and I think that to be a good red teamer, you need to know how to do a very, very good recon actions. It's very important because you need to map all the attack surface that you have. It's very important not to miss a thing.
Very cool. So what are some of your favorite open source hacking tools that are out there that's available for anyone to use?
I would say, let's say in the cloud, I have not a common, it's not common to say that, but I would say that being native is the best thing. Like, use the API of the cloud in order, to extract data from the environment is the best thing to do. From my experience using built using tools from GitHub for the cloud will not give me enough information. But if I will use the native, for example, Graph API tool, it will help me more. I mean, to attack an organization, you don't have to use an attack tools. You first you have to change your, like, it's the mind that matters. You need, like, to think like an attacker, to think outside of the box, but you don't have to use like automations at all. I think that most of the people starting to use automated tools from GitHub, and I would say, yeah, some of the tools are amazing and I use them as well, but it's very, very important to understand the techniques that stands behind the tools. First, in order, to not cause harm to your assets, because some part of the tools are very violent, and secondly, in order to understand what you're doing. I mean, um, tools can do your work, but it's very important to understand what they're doing.
That's a very good point there, because if it ever fails, then you can understand better what went wrong and troubleshoot it. So for someone that wants to be a red teamer, what would you advise? So someone's just starting out new, wants to be a red teamer, what would you advise them as far as trying to learn that role?
Um, I think that first, to be a red teamer, it's a cool role, but you need to be sure that it's interesting for you because you have to be very passionate about it. Because sometimes, as you said, you have to work sometimes until the nights and to be very determined to do your work. Because when I'm attacking an organization, I can't tell them at the end of the day, okay, I didn't succeed. because tomorrow another attacker will succeed. So I have to be very, very creative and to think outside of the box in order to do it. So I think that first of all, it's very important to be sure that it's interesting for you and that your personality fits it. Secondly, I think that the social network helps. I mean, you can find mentors like you and to listen to podcasts and to see lectures, etc. Like to get into the world and to understand the state of mind. And the third advice would be I think that most of the people are starting in the IT field or, as in the security field, and then like they're moving on to be red teamers. I think that understanding the IT world is very important before you becoming a red teamer.
Very good advice. So we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close out the episode?
Interesting question, Phil. um, I wasn't ready for that. I'm thinking.
That's okay. You take your time. That's just in case you haven't mentioned anything that you want to share. If you don't have anything else that you can think of, that's
Usually,
fine.
I love to talk. I love to talk a
Yeah.
lot. Usually, I have a lot of things to say, but for now, I can't think about a specific thing. But I would recommend the audience uh, to think outside of the box, to be creative, and to really understand what you're doing. This is the most important thing. Before you even start to scan, before you even starting to execute a tool, it's very important to first understand the threat sources and to understand the ground rules and to understand what is your goal. This is, I think, the best advice for red teamers.
Oh, very good. Thanks for joining. It was great to have you on this episode.
Thank you, Phil. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Phillip Wylie Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wylie. Until next time.